Hello guys, so in this series we're gonna talk about hairstyle and hair color and how they combine together for certain body types. And in today's video we're gonna talk about natural and flamboyant natural. I decided to combine natural and flamboyant natural in this case, not only because Kibbe doesn't use pure types anymore, but also because the recommendations are quite similar. I refer to pure naturals now as of more of a dry type rather than soft, because soft naturals are gonna be in the next video. If you're new to my channel, I have a huge Kibbe body types playlist. I'm gonna leave the link down below. Now, before you watch this video, you might wanna check this one, haircut plus hair color, and how they combine together. General rules. Believe it or not every hair color looks good with every haircut. Okay, let's start. Let's see what haircut Kibbe suggests for naturals. A loose hairstyle layered for a slightly tousled effect. Hair should be tousled, loose, and free. A soft geometric shape with a feathered outline. Layering is essential. Perms and body waves are fine, and your hair can definitely lean to the wild animal mane look for fun or evening wear. And of course, this book was written in the 80s, so perms and body waves looked approximately like that back then. Now, I think that would look something like this. You might not look as good in smooth, sleek styles, blunt-edged cuts, severe geometrics, boyishly cropped cuts, overly groomed styles, it's too stuffy and controlly on you normally, ornate or set styles, overly teased and coiffed styles. Now let's see what hair color he suggests. Hair color should always look natural with realistic color and shining, subtle highlights. Be very careful with complete color changes. Artificial colors or lights are very unsophisticated on you. Over-highlighting the hair is particularly matronly on you. Let's see what haircut Kibbe suggests for flamboyant natural. Hair should be loose, relaxed, and free. A tousled effect is best, so layering is always called for. If your hair is ultra-fine, thin, and wispy, you look best with a shortish cut that is layered around the face to create the illusion of volume. The outline is geometric, but the edges are softened by the layering. If your hair is thick, you can opt for a wilder lion's mane effect if you wish, but layering is still important. You might not look as good in all severe geometrics, in blunt-edged symmetrical cuts, in boyishly cropped cuts, in overly ornate, teased or coiffed hair, in smooth, sleek styles. Now let's see what hair color he suggests. Hair color should be rich and vibrant. If you choose artificial hair colors, keep them close to original color. Streaks of highlights can give you glow. You might not look as good with extremely artificial hair colors, such as bright red, blue-black, platinum blonde, unless it's very close to your natural color, and also with soft overall lightening. It can look a bit dull and aging on you. Okay, now let's look at some celebrities' examples. So, as you could notice, those recommendations for naturals and flamboyant naturals are quite similar. They're almost the same. This is another reason why I combined these two types together. For soft natural, the recommendations are a little bit different. However, all three naturals have many things in common, of course. Their bone structure. Let's first start with Jennifer Aniston, and even though she wasn't in Kibbe's official celebrities list, for some reason everybody was agreed that she was pure natural type. So here's her youngest pictures that I found. And you can see that her natural hair color is very dark ashy blonde, or I would say even light brown color. To me, it looks quite ashy, and that does look quite nice on her, I think. Then we have that very famous haircut that everybody started doing after the famous series Friends. Famous Rachel haircut and hair color. Warm light brown base with some light streaks, especially by the face. And it was styled in a rounded manner and it was cut in layers. I think this particular one is not the best. I like more when she has it grown. When it's grown, it stops being so set looking, so stiff. So normally they don't look quite good with stiff rounded haircuts. When it's longer, in this case it's more loose, it's more free, and layers also are acting differently when they are longer and not styled as rounded to the face. In terms of colors, I would say it's already quite big contrast, but it's within her palette. I think it's nice looking on her. But in modern world, I would say it's a bit too harsh contrast for the highlights for this type. I would go for softer balayage and more lighter ends and darker roots. Now let's look at this bob situation. And in terms of bob, there are two different bobs. Bobs that are elongated at the front and slightly shorter at the back. Normally it's called A-line bob. Or bobs can be more blunt. That means at the back and at the front, they're same length. So when the bob is blunt, it looks quite squarish. especially on types like naturals. You can see here that this bob is more blunt than elongated, so it slightly accentuates the squarishness of the bones. Your shoulders, your jawline, your chin, everything that you have squarish in your body is kind of exaggerating it a little bit. It's making it slightly more squarish than it is. And here she is with bob that is elongated at the front. It's still bob, but remember, they look great with softened geometry. So geometry does look good on them, it just has to be softened with layers. It just should not be as blunt or severe. So in this case, we can see immediately how more graceful her body looks. She doesn't look squarish anymore because that diagonal line that is at the front is kind of cutting all the squares and all the horizontal lines in the body. So if you still want to go for bob, if you don't want any layers, just go for bob that is slightly elongated at the front. In terms of the color, I think this color is great for her. All these blonde highlights are really freshening her, and her skin shines. These kind of famous 90s streaks, of course, I don't recommend now anymore. So this is one of the biggest no's for hair coloring, in my viewpoint, for any body type. When your hair is lighter at the top and more dark in the ends, it's a very strange trend that was very popular in the 90s. Right now, it does look very unnatural and cheap because it's against nature. In nature, your ends are thin, get lighter on the sun, and your roots are normally darker. Colors here are amazing. I would just flip the placement. And the haircut here is great. Now here, this is her famous ashy blonde long layered hair. This type of hair with elongated bangs, with loads of diagonals, uncertain shape, looks amazing on all the naturals. If you're a natural that is growing your hair longer, look at this haircut. You can do that and you will look amazing. Subtle highlights look brilliant here. She was also experimenting with darker hair colors, and I think they are a little bit too heavy for her, even though her natural hair color is kind of like that on the right, dark ashy blonde or light brown color. It's nice on her, but I think some highlights just give her that freshness. And that very black color on the left, I think it's a no-no. It just looks too heavy. Here she has this red hair. I like that the tone of this red hair is quite natural. It's something that we can imagine her being born with, rather than if she would do something very red or very artificial or very pinkish. So I think it fits her. I think the hairstyle on the right, with those stiff curls and slightly stiff bangs, is not as flattering on her as the hairstyle on the left. Now here she goes for those platinum streaks. And I love it too. I love that she keeps her roots darker. I love the way the balayage is made. The technique is amazing here. If she was platinum blonde all over, we would definitely notice it. It would look very artificial and very cheap. Now let's go to Flamboyant Naturals. And as you know, this Metamorphosis book by Kibbe was written in the 80s. 90s supermodel era began right after that. If you noticed in the recommendations for Flamboyant Naturals, Kibbe doesn't recommend flat, sleek hair without layering, without tousled effect for Flamboyant Naturals. And I decided to search long hair in the 80s, and this is the only pictures that I found. I didn't find any single picture of a woman with straight long hair without any layering, without that big curly effect in the 80s. And I think this is because at that time, just long straight hair without any layering were mostly worn by women who didn't follow any modern trends. Yes, in the 70s it was kind of cool, it was a hippie movement, but then in the 80s we have this perm hair, and maybe this straight hair just considered to be quite dowdy in the 80s. 80s was all about volume. Then in the 90s supermodel era, this is when I can see that long hair come back, but not in a hippie context, but in a glam context. That straight, sleek, and long hair, sometimes with some blowouts, sometimes with some bangs, but just in general, that was 90s supermodel iconic look. Now later, Kibbe mentioned that majority of 90s supermodels are flamboyant naturals. Of course, all flamboyant naturals are very, very different. And not every flamboyant natural woman looks like 90s supermodels. They can have slightly different flash and height and facial features, but they have certain things in common. It's elongation and width on top. If we look at Naomi Campbell, for example, we mostly remember her with this long, sleek hair without any layering. And this is her then, and this is her now. I think it looks stunning on her. Of course, she was experimenting a lot with different haircuts and hairstyles, and I think they all look quite interesting on her. But we still remember that iconic long hair. Same with other 90s supermodels like Claudia Schiffer. She would always stay within her color range, from dark ashy blonde to light platinum blonde. She would have layers from time to time, but most of the time she would have her hair quite sleek and long, occasionally going for bangs. Cindy Crawford. also looks stunning with long and straight hair. In her case, though, it normally was not very sleek because naturally her hair is slightly wavy. So she would normally have this 90s blowout, the one that is so popular nowadays. Having that layered haircut, she would have those huge curls that would give her a bunch of volume. Also in the 90s, she had that famous money piece by her face. And just in general, that combination of red hair and yellow strikes or yellow money piece was very popular at that time. And there are many women who are trying to repeat that. She also doesn't go too far from her color range. Her natural hair color is brown, so she whether would go slightly lighter in a warmer brown or slightly dark red color, or she would go dark brown, exactly like Kibbe was recommending. Brooke Shields naturally had this light brown hair color, quite cool in the undertone in my viewpoint. Then she started experimenting with the overall blonde, and I think that is a great example of what Kibbe means by lightening overall effect, how it can age them actually and not freshen them. Of course, it depends on your coloration, if you're warm or cool, how light you are, how muted you are, how clear you are, and things like that. But you can see in her particular case how much it's visible. For example, here on the left, she has this beautiful subtle highlights, that natural balayage, keeping her natural dark roots. We can call it blonde, but how different that looks to the pictures on the right, where she has this overall lightened effect. And it's not even brassy to me. It looks beautiful, fresh, golden blonde, but it's just in her case that has that tiring effect. Tracee Ellis Ross. I still think that with black hair color, she looks gorgeous and her best. When she tried to make her hair red, which is quite artificial color, it's not done in a balayage manner. Maybe if she had that balayage with dark roots and slightly reddish ends, that would look different. But here, she has this overall lightened hair color, slightly artificial. We can see that it doesn't belong to her naturally. That cheapens the look immediately. But when she has her own black hair color, that just looks stunning. Another great example, Nicole Kidman. She's a natural redhead. The texture of her hair, as I understand, is this tiny curls. She had so many different roles in the movies, so she had so many changes with her hairstyle and hair color. For example, I think that dark black hair color just doesn't suit her complexion. But again, it's very hard to judge on the picture because basically any hair color, any hairstyle you can make beautiful on the picture with correct lighting, good color correction, and certain makeup. But just in general, I think if we would see her on a daylight, we would feel it's not suiting her. It's quite dull on her. Hairstyles are okay. Now here, boyish cut doesn't look very good on them, and maybe it suits to her face because her facial features are quite delicate and smallish looking. But if we checked her with this haircut head to toe, we would see it just doesn't fit to the body concept. It's just not her. But of course, as I said, for different roles, she would go for that. That hair color, though, I think it does suit her, and I think it's quite close to her natural color. And again, lighter effect in her case would be great because she is naturally not dark. She has light skin, light features, and she is redhead naturally. So anything in a golden range would suit her, especially done in natural balayage manner like here. Light money piece, slightly darker roots, beautiful strawberry blonde, all that looks great. And then later she started experimenting with this platinum blonde. Again, I think in her case that suits her. I still like her a little bit better with slightly darker roots, would be more natural on her, but considering her eye color, her skin color, her overall concept, I think on her that looks quite natural. So we can imagine that she could have this hair naturally. It doesn't give us that artificial feel. Another lady that is naturally light is Gwyneth Paltrow. We can see that naturally she has quite light skin, even freckles, light eyes, and quite light hair, maybe dark ashy blonde. She was experimenting a lot, and I guess for the movies mostly, of course. So here she has this very heavy hair, and of course her eyes were very empty without this heavy makeup, so she had to compensate for that. And I think it just looks artificial. It doesn't look bad on her necessarily. I think her facial features can pull that off, but when you look at her, you can perceive that it's not her. It looks like a wig almost. Now, when she has this strawberry blonde to that beautiful light red hair, I think that suits her just because she has this freckles. And normally women who have freckles, even though naturally they might have light brown hair, dark ashy blonde, they normally can pull off different kinds of red hair. Maybe not bright red, super artificial, but something that nature would give us, they can pull that off. And I think she does look nice with that. Still, in my viewpoint, her best choice is her dark natural roots and bleached all light buttery color ends. Sometimes she goes for overall blonde, and I still like it because she has this thin light brows. We kind of can predict that she's light by nature, so I think in her case it doesn't create that much of that artificial thing. If we talk about hairstyles, I can tell that all these hairstyles look great on her. She mostly is wearing that straight long hair, slightly layered on the ends. That doesn't necessarily look like lion's mane, but as I mentioned before, after 90s, long hair had a little bit different concept. Another very similar coloration to Gwyneth Paltrow is Cameron Diaz. She has light eyes, quite light skin, and naturally light hair. I guess her natural hair color is dark ashy blonde. So again, all these range from dark ashy blonde to platinum blonde suits her very well. She looks stunning with those light streaks of color. Her hair texture, though, is naturally quite thin and straight, so we can see different examples of how she's playing with that. In terms of haircut, she would have different kinds of bobs throughout her career, and I love all these bobs unless they are very geometric and blunt. So anything slightly tousled, slightly asymmetrical, slightly elongated, diagonal lines, all that is very, very flattering on them. It gives them freedom. You don't have to always have huge volume. It's mostly the shape, the layers, and the color, and how they interact with each other. Not everybody likes tousled hair either, so it's not as much about tousleness in my viewpoint as well. You can go for more sleek hairstyles too, because geometry itself looks good on them. It just has to be softened, in this case by some layering. Of course, this layering doesn't have to be too much, not to thin out the ends of your hair. Your hair still has to be full and rich looking. It's just if it's all same length, and especially if it's a blunt bob that is chin length, this is when the geometry becomes sharp, not blunt. And again, when she was experimenting with darker hair colors, not necessarily bad on her, she was trying to make it work for her. So she would get more tan, she would have darker brows, she would have smoky eye makeup. So she had to change certain things to become a brunette. But still she got back to blonde quite fast because it's just too far from nature and we can predict that. For naturals and flamboyant naturals, it's especially seen. So every time she goes for that platinum blonde or just golden blonde hair color with some darker roots, even if it's a little bit of darker roots, she shines. It's close to her nature. When she has this platinum blonde from the roots, especially when she lightened her brows once, just to give that appearance of very blonde. Again, slightly too artificial for her already. So we need darker roots, we need more natural look. Now let's look at Anne Hathaway. She's naturally brunette. She has quite rich, dark brown hair color, and her eyes are very dark and bright. Her skin is very light, so she has a lot of contrast. She is bright winter, I guess, in the 12-season color analysis, but I'm not sure. Let me know if you know. Of course, she was getting lighter at some point in her career. I'm not sure, maybe it was specifically for the movie. Of course, first stage of going blonde is normally that brassy tone, slightly lighter. So it's too golden for her. It's not only the color problem, it's also a flamboyant natural problem because they don't look good enough when they're lightening their hair if their natural hair is quite intense and dark. And we can see great example of this here. Hairstyle though is amazing. Here for one of the movies she did get blonde and blonde all over. This blonde is warm golden blonde. It's not very light platinum. It's already not brassy tone. It's a little bit lighter than brassy tone. So there are some women who look amazing with this hair color. Not her though, because she is still cool in coloration and quite contrasted, so that washes out her contrast. Now, some directors perceive her as being this very sexy woman and give her that roles to play. In my viewpoint, not every woman that has pouty mouth can play those very sexy woman roles. It's a very certain type of a woman who can play these roles very easily. Normally for this type of a woman, if you go a little bit more sexy in their outfit, it already can become vulgar, so they have different borders. She is not that. She has very beautiful face. She's very beautiful woman just in general, but she doesn't have this concept of a sexy woman. And some directors don't understand that and they give her these roles to play. So that does look slightly artificial on her. She's still more of a girl next door rather than the sexy, sophisticated James Bond kind of a girl. Now, this hairstyle included all the don'ts in it, but of course it's whether Photoshop or it's just a wig. It was for fun, I'm sure. But it's just to show you the example. It's very geometric blonde cut with very artificial bleached blonde, which is
just very far from her nature. So you can see yourself how facial features are just not fit into that concept. And when they did this bleached blonde for her in Alice in Wonderland, it's not necessarily bad on the pictures. I actually like it on the pictures because her huge eyes and that makeup, that hairstyle, that lighting, that outfit, everything is giving her that fairy tale effect. But every time I could see her talk and walk and all those gestures, it is just so far from her nature. She's not light by nature, by bone structure. She's not light in her facial expressions, in her facial features, so that all didn't suit, in my viewpoint, to her beingness, that role itself. But if I just look at the picture, that looks very surrealistic, which I love.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope that was interesting. See you soon. Bye-bye.